boy was 8 years old, unconscious, and barely alive when paramedics found him in a Palmdale apartment. His name was Gabriel Fernandez, and the woman who called 911, his mother Pearl, had just told them he'd fallen and hit his head. Pearl had a hard childhood. Her father was often in prison. Her mother treated her badly. When Pearl was 11, she ran away. She started drinking and using substances at a young age. A psychological report during her trial said she had depression, a developmental disability, possible personality issues, and possible PTSD. In 2012, Gabriel returned to live with Pearl and her boyfriend, Izaro Aguirre, after spending time with relatives. Friends and family thought they took him back to receive welfare benefits. Once he moved in, his treatment worsened. For 8 months, Gabriel faced harsh mistreatment. He was hit and burned, often went without enough food, and struggled to breathe at times. He was forced to eat cat litter and waste. They humiliated him with words. He was locked in a small cabinet, often gagged, and made to sleep there. His siblings said Pearl and Izaro called him names when he played with dolls or wore girls' clothes, and they laughed at him during these episodes. His teacher, Jennifer Garcia, noticed bruises and heard troubling comments. Gabriel once asked if injuries from a beating were normal. The Child Welfare Office was alerted. Social workers visited but did not remove him. They never spoke to Gabriel or his siblings alone. They accepted Pearl's explanations. Later, 4 social workers and 2 supervisors faced accusations of falsifying records and mistreating their duties. Those charges were dropped in 2020. On May 22, 2013, Gabriel was beaten again for not picking up his toys. Pearl dragged him into a bedroom with Izaro. Neighbors heard screaming and thuds, then silence. Pearl called 911 and said Gabriel had fallen and hit his head. Paramedics found him naked, unconscious, with a cracked skull, 3 broken ribs, small metal pellets in his body, and bruises covering his skin. A paramedic said every part of Gabriel showed signs of harm. He was rushed to a local hospital, then flown to a children's hospital in Los Angeles. He was declared brain dead, and 2 days later on May 24th, he lost his life at 8 years old. Pearl and Izaro were arrested on May 23rd. At first, Pearl faced charges of endangering a child. After Gabriel's passing, both faced the most serious first-degree homicide charges, including a special count for extreme mistreatment. Prosecutors requested the harshest punishment. In court, a prosecutor described the 8-month pattern of mistreatment as a campaign of terror, saying it was worse than what many prisoners of war endure. On February 15, 2018, Pearl made a deal. She admitted guilt for first-degree homicide to avoid the harshest punishment. At her plea hearing, she said, "I'm sorry for what happened. I wish Gabriel was alive. Every day I wish I had made better choices. I'm sorry to my other children. I love them." A judge then gave her life in prison without any chance of release. She is held at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. Pearl later sought a new sentence under California's 2021 law changes. In June 2021, the judge denied her request, saying she played a major role in Gabriel's passing. Izaro went to trial in November 2017. A jury found him guilty of first-degree charges. He received the harshest punishment allowed, but a state hold on carrying it out means he remains on row at Corcoran State Prison. Pearl was 29 when Gabriel lost his life. She is now 41, with no chance of release. This case revealed major failures by child welfare services. It led to reforms at the Los Angeles County Child Welfare Office, but those changes came too late for Gabriel. In the next case, one daughter was locked under a table for years, the other set on fire by her own brothers. But who told them to do it? Teresa Jimmy Francine Cross was born in 1946 in Sacramento, California. She had one older sister. Her mother, Swanee Gay, passed of heart failure in 1961. Teresa was only 15 then. Her father, James Jim Cross, later developed Parkinson's disease. He lost his job and became withdrawn and harsh toward his family. Losing her mother and facing her father's behavior left Teresa with deep emotional pain. At 16, Teresa left high school. She married Clifford Clyde Sanders that same year. Their marriage was often stormy. In June 1964, during a heated argument, Teresa fired a rifle at him as he walked away. The shot struck his back. Teresa said she acted in self-defense. A court agreed, and she was cleared of wrongdoing. Over the next decade, Teresa had 6 children. The family lived first in Orangevale, then in a small Sacramento apartment. As the children grew, Teresa cut off their phone service and barred visitors. She withdrew them from school and kept them inside. Neighbors saw the apartment was very dirty and smelled bad. They also noticed the children looked anxious and afraid. Teresa's harsh treatment focused on her two oldest daughters, Sheila and Susan. She forced them to hold each other still while she struck them with a paddle. She burned their skin with lit cigarettes. She made them eat what they had just vomited. At one point, she handcuffed Susan under the dining room table. She left her there with a gag for 2 years. If Susan vomited, she had to taste it again. Teresa later said she resented seeing her daughters grow up and look nice when she felt herself growing old. On July 16, 1984, Teresa took Susan's handcuffs off for a moment. Then she told Terry to hold a gun to her sister's head. Teresa said Terry should pull the trigger if Susan moved. While they were getting breakfast ready, a spoon fell and startled Terry. Terry fired the gun by accident. Susan suffered significant internal loss. Teresa did not get medical help. Instead, she forced someone to pry the bullet out while Susan was unconscious. This led to a serious infection. After that, Teresa packed Susan into large trash bags with her few personal items. She told her sons, Robert and William, to drive her to a roadside spot in Squaw Valley. There, Teresa ordered them to pour gasoline over their sister and set her on fire. They thought she was already gone. The next day, passers-by found her smoldering body. She was only 17. On June 21, 1985, Sheila was found locked in a bedroom closet. She had no food or water for days. She too did not survive. Her body stayed in that closet for 3 more days before anyone found her. Teresa then had her sons wrap Sheila's remains in a cardboard box and leave it near Truckee Tahoe Airport. It was discovered a few hours later. Throughout this time, no one in the family or the authorities stepped in. Teresa kept the children isolated and terrified. When Susan briefly left and ended up in a hospital, Teresa convinced staff she was mentally unwell. The others were too frightened to speak up. In September 1986, Teresa told Terry to set fire to their apartment to cover up what had happened. Terry poured lighter fluid and lit a match, but the closet where Sheila passed was left untouched. After that, all her children except Robert Jr. escaped and never returned. Robert Jr. stayed with Teresa until November 1991, when he was arrested for a bar robbery that ended in another person's passing. He got a 16-year term. Teresa then moved to Salt Lake City and began using her maiden name. In October 1993, Terry called a tip line for America's Most Wanted. She gave details that matched both girls' disappearances. Placer County detectives connected the dots. Robert and William confirmed Terry's story. On November 10, 1993, officers arrested Teresa while she worked as a caregiver in Salt Lake City. 5 days later, on November 15, 1993, prosecutors charged Teresa for taking 2 lives and plotting with others to do so. She first pleaded not guilty. But when it became clear her son Robert Jr. would testify against her, she accepted a deal. On October 17, 1995, she was sentenced to 2 back-to-back life terms, each of 50 years to life, at the California Institution for Women in Chino. She was refused release in July 2019. Next, meet a biochemist whose formula for success became a plan to make her husband disappear. Lissa Schuster grew up in Clarence, Missouri. She was born in 1960. She earned a degree in biochemistry. After college, she moved to California. There, she opened a clinical lab in Clovis. In 1982, she married Timothy Schuster. They had 2 children, Kristen, born in 1985, and Tyler, born around 1989. As Larissa's career grew, they moved from Fresno to Clovis. By 2002, their marriage was falling apart. Larissa doubted Timothy's abilities. While at a conference in Chicago, she began an affair. When divorce and custody fights started, Larissa won full custody of the children and kept their home. Timothy moved into a condo. Larissa then began leaving angry, threatening messages for him. In one voicemail, she used hateful insults and warned him that something was coming. Timothy saved those messages. A trust set up in 1999 said that if Timothy passed first, Larissa would receive his retirement benefits, insurance money, and half their assets. Prosecutors say Larissa chose to have Timothy disappear rather than go through a divorce. On July 9 or 10, 2003, Timothy did not show up for breakfast. He missed picking up Tyler from school. He vanished. Larissa calmly took Tyler on a trip to Missouri and then to Disney World, as if nothing were wrong. A former lab employee, James Fagone, first denied any role. He later admitted that Larissa lured Timothy to her lab house by claiming their son was sick. When Timothy answered the door, Larissa stunned him with a device and used a rag soaked in sedative to knock him out. Then she and James bound his hands and feet with zip ties. While he was still alive, they placed him headfirst into a 55-gallon metal drum. Neighbors later heard him crying out in pain as Larissa poured a strong acid into the drum. When the lid wouldn't close, Larissa used a handsaw to remove Timothy's feet so it would seal. Authorities found the drum days later in a storage unit Larissa had rented. Only the lower half of his body remained recognizable. James went on trial in November 2006. He claimed Larissa forced him to help. Jurors watched his recorded confession where he said he held the barrel and put him in at Larissa's orders. He was found guilty of first-degree homicide and given life in prison without any chance of release. Larissa's trial began in December 2007 in Los Angeles to avoid local bias. Media had already dubbed her the Acid Lady. The jury found her guilty of first-degree homicide for financial gain. On May 16, 2008, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In court, her daughter Kristen spoke directly to her mother. Kristen said Larissa had lost all rights as a parent and a person. She told her mother that she hoped Larissa would be haunted by the memory of Timothy's final moments. Larissa remained silent during the hearing, following her lawyer's advice. As of 2022, Larissa is held at the California Institution for Women in Chowchilla. She has asked the governor for a reduced sentence. Timothy's family, including his brother and children, oppose any change. In prison, Larissa works in peer health education. She teaches about disease prevention and consent issues. She studied to become an addiction counselor. She also learned to play guitar, joined worship services, and knitted a blanket for her grandchild. She has written that prison taught her about herself and the choices she made. Online comments reflect shock and anger. Many people call her actions diabolical and say they felt outraged by how she betrayed her family's trust and caused such harm. Why didn't James accept a deal that would have shifted more blame onto Larissa? His defense of being under extreme pressure sealed both their outcomes. Experts say a plea deal might have muddled the case against Larissa. Why was she not given capital punishment? At the time, California faced many legal hurdles for capital cases. Prosecutors opted to seek life without parole to avoid lengthy delays and uncertainty. Her conviction and sentence were upheld on appeal in 2011. Now consider a former nurse whose anger at authority led her to prey on elderly women. Dana Sue Gray was born in 1957 in Pasadena, California. Her mother, Beverly Arnett, once held beauty queen titles and worked as a model from time to time. Her father, Russell Armbrust, was a hairstylist. She grew up in a middle-class home. Conflicts at home were common. Her mother's forceful manner left lasting scars. Dana later said she often felt anger toward women in authority. Gray trained as a nurse. She spent years working in surgery and in labor and delivery at Inland Valley Regional Medical Center. She married when she was young and had children. Over time, her marriage ended and she struggled with dependency on substances. Financial worries grew as her divorce, career problems, and spending habits piled up. In early 1994, over a 6-week period, Gray carried out a series of disturbing incidents across Southern California. She focused on older women living alone in retirement communities. She took their credit cards and valuables after overpowering them. Her first known target was Norma Davis, age 86, on February 14th. Davis was pierced multiple times with a sharp object in her Lake Elsinore home. 16 days later, on March 2nd, she set upon Dora Beebe, age 87, in the same area. Beebe was harmed to the point she no longer moved. On February 28th, and again on March 16th, June Roberts, age 67, was pierced many times with scissors in Canyon Lake. Between those two dates on March 10th, Gray struck Dorinda Hawkins, age 57, at an antique shop. Hawkins' air supply was cut off with a phone cord but fought back and lived. Experts believe Gray chose older, smaller women because she could use her anger toward her mother on them. She later said that while holding one woman down, it felt like she was silencing her mother. At the same time, she admitted she shopped freely after each incident. She said buying things helped her feel calm. Hawkins' escape changed everything. Her description led police to Gray. Officers arrested her on March 16, 1994. At Gray's home, they found items belonging to the victims. Receipts and surveillance videos showed her using stolen cards soon after each incident. Fibers and fingerprints linked her to the scenes. This evidence made her path clear. Gray faced charges for 3 counts in the first degree and 1 count of attempted fatal act. In 1998, she accepted a deal to avoid the most severe sentence. She admitted guilt to 2 cases, those of Roberts and Beebe, and the attempt on Hawkins. The charges for the first victim, Davis, were dropped under this agreement. On October 16, 1998, the court gave her life without the chance of release. She is serving that term at Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. What drove her more? The need for control or money? Gray's own words and expert views suggest her anger and desire to dominate mattered more than the stolen cash. Even so, she did spend heavily after each episode. In prison, Gray joined educational programs and led projects to help other residents. She has said she believes she could have helped many people if she had made different choices. Gray has spoken out about changes to the prison system. She drew criticism when she proposed banning transgender women from women's prisons. This idea raised complex issues about identity and safety behind bars. Gray's case remains in the spotlight. She began life as a caregiver. Then she became someone who overpowered vulnerable people. Her method of cutting off breathing is more often seen in male offenders. And her shopping sprees may have been more about her emotions than her need for money. The next victim threatened to tell her bosses everything. Hours later, he was found cold and covered in roses. And if you find stories like these important, consider subscribing. Kristen Margareta Rossom was born in 1976 in Memphis, Tennessee. She grew up in Claremont, California. Her mother was a college professor. Her father worked as a university administrator. Later, she moved to Virginia. Eventually, she returned to California. In the early 1990s, she began using illegal substances. After college, she graduated with highest honors in chemistry. In March 2000, she started working as a toxicologist at the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office. On November 6, 2000, Kristen's husband, Greg DeVillers, was found unresponsive in their San Diego home. Red rose petals covered his body, arranged much like a scene from the movie American Beauty. Medical reports revealed he had a toxic amount of a strong painkiller in his body, 7 times higher than what's considered safe. Kristen called 911 and said he had taken his own life. At first, the case was treated as a self-inflicted incident, but evidence soon suggested someone had caused his passing. What gave her a reason to act? Greg discovered that Kristen was using substances again after she had promised she had quit. He also learned she was in a relationship with her supervisor, Michael Robertson. He threatened to tell her bosses unless she resigned. Investigators believe Kristen acted to stop him. She wanted to protect her job and her personal relationship. In the hours before Greg became unresponsive, he lay immobile and it didn't match the pattern of a quick overdose. Toxicology showed extremely high levels of a powerful substance in both his system and stomach. Those results, together with access to unsealed samples at the office where Kristen and Robertson worked, raised doubts about an accidental overdose. Kristen's defense admitted that a powerful substance caused Greg's passing. They claimed he took it himself due to marital stress. But that story didn't add up. The substance acts fast. Greg would have lost consciousness almost instantly. He couldn't have taken multiple doses while already unconscious. Her lawyers didn't request the tests that show how the substance breaks down. Those might have revealed it was added after his body had shut down. Instead, they accepted the story that he took it on his own. Kristen was arrested in June 2001. By January 2002, she gave up her right to bail. Her jury trial began in October 2002. Prosecutors argued she used a powerful substance to harm Greg, possibly after another sedative failed to achieve her goal. They pointed to missing patches and related materials from the lab inventory. They also argued that the rose petal scene was set up to mislead investigators. In November 2002, the jury found her responsible for a first-degree intentional homicide. In December 2002, she received a sentence of life in prison with no chance of parole and a $10,000 fine. She is held at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. Her conviction went before California appellate courts, which upheld it. In 2010, a 3-judge panel from the Ninth Circuit ordered a new hearing. They said her lawyers might have failed her by not testing for breakdown products of the substance. That testing could have shown sample tampering. In 2011, under new U.S. Supreme Court rules, that order was withdrawn. She did not receive any relief. Many people ask whether her lawyers did enough. They never requested tests that might have proved contamination of the samples. Without those tests, they admitted that the substances caused Greg's passing. A stronger defense could have raised doubts by showing the substance was added later. The court said her lawyers failed to investigate properly, but they also said there was no clear proof that missing those tests changed the final outcome. Up next are 2 elderly women, 2 homeless men, and millions in insurance money. Helen Elg was a wealthy former landlord in Southern California. She was born in Texas in 1931. Over the years, she built a real estate fortune in the Los Angeles area. She owned several properties and a multi-million-dollar home in Santa Monica. She divorced twice. In the late 1990s, she met Olga Rutterschmidt. Olga was another older woman who later faced charges with Helen in what became known as the Black Widow case. From about 1997 to 2005, Helen and Olga took out life insurance policies on 2 homeless men, Paul Vados and Kenneth McDavid. They listed themselves as the beneficiaries, each time using a different false relationship. They gained the trust of these vulnerable men by acting as caretakers or companions. Then they staged fatal vehicle crashes so they could collect the insurance payouts. The first victim was Paul Vados. He was 73 years old and a Hungarian immigrant. On November 8, 1999, he was found lifeless in a Hollywood alley. At first, authorities thought it was a crash where the driver fled. Later, investigators discovered that Helen and Olga had taken out 8 insurance policies on him since 1997. After he passed away, the women received large sums of money. The second victim was Kenneth McDavid. He was about 50 years old. Between late 2002 and early 2003, Helen and Olga took out 13 insurance policies on him. They claimed to be his fiancée, cousin, or business partner. On June 21, 2005, surveillance cameras recorded him being struck by a silver Mercury Sable. That car had been provided by the two women. Helen received about $1.54 million. Olga got about $674,000. Until their scheme fell apart. In total, they collected around $2.8 million. They targeted 2 of the most vulnerable people in society. Because the men were homeless, their passings went unnoticed at first. They were arrested in 2006. In Los Angeles County, they faced charges of first-degree homicide, conspiracy to commit homicide, and insurance fraud. Prosecutors played secret jailhouse recordings. In one tape, Olga blamed Helen for taking out too many insurances, saying, "You're going to prison, honey." Those words hurt their defense. During the trial, a man named Jimmy Covington testified. He said Olga had tried to arrange insurance on his life, too. She offered him shelter and help with welfare. He grew uneasy when asked to sign papers and give personal details. He realized they were trying to insure his life and walked away. The defense argued that because of their advanced age, the women could not harm anyone. The jury was not convinced. The hidden recordings and other evidence were too strong. One prosecutor compared the case to a dark comedy, saying it was like Arsenic and Old Lace, but without Cary Grant. In April 2008, the jury found Helen guilty on both homicide counts and of conspiracy. Olga was found guilty of conspiracy and the homicide of McDavid. One count ended in a deadlock but was later resolved by an alternate juror and a judge's instructions. In July 2008, Judge David Wesley imposed 2 consecutive life sentences without any chance of early release. He spoke harshly about their actions. He said the victims needed food, water, and shelter. They thought they were getting this from you. Instead, these unfortunate men were sacrificed on your altar of greed. The women appealed. In August 2009, the California Court of Appeal upheld the verdict. In October 2012, the California Supreme Court refused to overturn it. Today, Helen is serving her sentence at the California Institution for Women. Olga is at the Central California Women's Facility. Both remain locked up for life. The Black Widow case shocked Los Angeles and the nation. It showed how 2 older women used kindness as a cover to get rich in a fatal insurance scheme. Helen Golay and Olga Rutterschmidt preyed on homeless men for financial gain. Now what about a woman who helped husband lure a trusting couple out to sea? Jennifer Lynn Henderson was the young wife of Skylar Preciosa de Leon, who was born John Jacobson Jr. They lived in Long Beach, California. She had 2 children before the tragic incident. She was born around 1979 or 1980. For a time, she took her husband's last name. After they split, she went back to Henderson, her own family name. At her trial, she looked fragile. Dark circles showed under her eyes. Her clothes hung loosely. She sat quietly as the court delivered its verdict. Her husband once appeared as an extra on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. He left the Marines without permission and had been convicted before. They owed more than $25,000 in bills. Together, they earned less than $10,000 a year. In November 2004, they spotted an ad by Thomas and Jackie Hawks. The Hawks wanted to sell their 55-foot yacht, the Well-Deserved. That boat had been their home for 2 years. The Hawks lived in Prescott, Arizona. Jennifer joined Skylar at the first meetings. She was pregnant and carried their baby daughter. They wanted to look like a stable family. They hoped this would win the Hawks' trust. A week before the final sea trial, Jennifer brought the baby aboard again. She stood beside the child as proof of their honesty. The court said this helped put the Hawks at ease. On the morning of November 15, 2004, Thomas and Jackie Hawks went out for a test sail. Skylar went along with them. His friends Alonzo McChain and John Fitzgerald Kennedy joined the trip. Jennifer stayed on shore. While at sea, McChain and Kennedy overpowered the Hawks. They gagged and taped them. They forced the couple to sign over the yacht. Then they chained them to an anchor. The anchor dropped into deep water. The Hawks did not come back. Jennifer was not on the yacht. But she had helped plan the event. She destroyed proof. She backdated the sale papers. She got rid of the Hawks car in Mexico. She tried to tap into their bank accounts. Phone records showed Schuyler called Jennifer 15 times that day. His calls ran from early morning until after midnight. Prosecutors said they were in constant contact. Why did she go along? Was she terrified of her husband? Or did she want the yacht and money? Her lawyers said she was tricked and did not know everything. But Machane said she asked for the baby to be brought on board. He said she lied to investigators more than once. Jennifer went on trial first. She turned down 2 offers of full immunity in return for her testimony. She chose instead to face the charges herself. On November 17, 2006, after 4 hours of jury discussion, she was found guilty. The jury decided she had helped plan and carry out the fatal act for money. In October 2007, the court set her sentence. The Hawks' son spoke in court. He asked that Jennifer's children be raised by others. He said they should not know what she did. Other family members shared their grief. They said Jennifer had used her own unborn child to help with the plan. Jennifer did not speak at sentencing. As she left the courtroom, she turned to her relatives and gave a small smile. Then she walked away in silence. The judge gave her 2 life terms with no chance of release. Jennifer remains at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. It is one of the largest women's prisons in the state. Schuyler and Kennedy faced trial later. They received sentences calling for capital punishment. California has not carried out capital punishment since 2006. Machane admitted his role and got a reduced term. He served about 20 years and was released by 2021. Now imagine a mother stood by as a child, endured nearly 2 decades in captivity. Nancy Garrido was found guilty in California. Her birth name was Nancy Bocanegra. She worked as a nursing aide. She also helped patients in physical therapy. She became known for helping her husband, Philip Garrido, take and hold a young girl for many years. Nancy first met Philip during a visit to her uncle in a Kansas federal prison. He was serving time for taking and holding someone without permission and for forced intimate contact. They wrote to each other and married in prison in 1981. After his release, they moved to Antioch, California. Philip Garrido was born in 1951. He had a long record of forced intimate contact convictions. Nancy was born on July 18, 1955 in Seguin, Texas. No other cases link her to harm except the one involving J.C. Lee Dugard. As of 2025, she is 70 years old and remains in a California prison. On June 10, 1991, 11-year-old J.C. Lee Dugard was walking to her school bus stop in Myers, California. Philip used a stun gun to control her. Nancy then pulled her into their car. 2 people, including J.C.'s stepfather, saw what happened. They drove about 168 miles to the Garridos' property in Antioch. J.C. was kept in sheds, tents, and makeshift shelters behind their house. She was often left without clothes and kept in handcuffs. She was made to wear certain clothes for Philip's fantasies. In 1993, Philip was sent back to prison for breaking parole rules. Nancy then looked after J.C. alone for about 5 months. During that time, J.C. stayed inside and did not try to run away. People wondered if Nancy was under Philip's control or if she chose to help. A court later decided she was responsible for helping him. Over the years, Philip forced intimate contact on J.C. many times. He fathered 2 daughters with her, born in 1994 and 1997. The girls believed Nancy was their mother and J.C. was their older sister. J.C. was never allowed to go to school. The children never saw a doctor. J.C. later taught her daughters in the backyard. Philip said he needed J.C.'s help to deal with his own problems. Nancy stayed by his side. Her defense team said Philip threatened her and she had no choice. But she was an adult who stayed dependent on him throughout. Both Nancy and Philip first pleaded not guilty. On April 28, 2011, they changed their pleas. Philip admitted to many counts of taking and holding someone without permission and forced intimate contact. Nancy admitted to helping with those acts. Her lawyer said she wanted to spare J.C. and her children from testifying. At their sentencing on June 2, 2011, J.C.'s mother read a statement about how much harm the family had suffered. J.C. did not attend. She later said she refused to spend another moment with the Garridos. She told Nancy, "There is no God who would approve of what you did. I hope you both have as many sleepless nights as I did." Nancy received a sentence of 36 years to life. She could ask for release in her 70s, likely around 2034. Philip was given 431 years to life, which means he will remain behind bars for the rest of his life. The judge called Philip's actions beyond horrible and said they destroyed J.C.'s life. When Nancy was led back to jail, she mouthed "love you" to Philip. The judge refused her request for a private goodbye or to watch his sentencing. As of mid-2025, Nancy remains in a California prison, still serving her sentence. The next woman believed she could see witches, and if she saw one, that person wouldn't live long. Susan Carson was born Susan Barnes in 1941. By the late 1970s, she was divorced and raising 2 teenage sons. Around 1978, she met James Clifford Carson in Phoenix, Arizona. He later called himself Michael Bear Carson. Before Susan met him, his ex-wife noticed he was using substances and growing distant. Susan and Michael quickly became close. They shared an interest in mysticism, yoga, unconventional beliefs, and substance use. Later, they adopted a form of Islam. They said this faith inspired them to carry out fatal acts. Their relationship pushed them away from family. After marrying Michael, Suzanne's life took a sharp turn. They moved across the western U.S. into parts of Europe. They often used substances. They also embraced a radical spiritual ideology. Between March 1981 and January 1983, Susan and Michael carried out 3 brutal, fatal incidents in Northern California. Their first victim was Karen Barnes. She was 23 and lived with them in San Francisco. On March 7, 1981, Susan labeled her a witch. Susan believed Barnes had tricked them into false religious practices. She thought this harmed her health and yoga abilities. Together, Susan and Michael used a sharp tool to strike Barnes 13 times. They then crushed her skull. Next, they wrapped her body in a blanket. Finally, they hid her remains in a basement. Their second victim was Clark Stevens. He was 26 and worked on a cannabis farm in Alder Point, Humboldt County. Stevens reportedly insulted or acted aggressively toward Susan. In May 1982, Michael used a firearm to shoot him. After that, they burned his body. Then they buried what was left under chicken manure in the woods. Their last victim was John Charles Helyar. He was 30 and was hitchhiking in Sonoma County in January 1983. During the drive, Susan decided he was a witch. On River Road, they argued. Susan used a sharp tool to inflict multiple wounds. Michael then fired a gun at Helyar twice. Motorists saw the scene. Susan and Michael fled in Helyar's car. They soon crashed. Police arrested them minutes later. Later, the pair said they were pacifists and vegetarian yoga practitioners. They described their faith as a radical form of Islam. They called themselves vegetarian Muslim warriors. They also said they kept a list of other targets. That list included Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, and Johnny Carson. They wrote about this in a manifesto titled Cry for War. Suzanne's main reason was her belief that these people were witches. She felt they threatened her spirit and body. She said Clark Stevens had harassed her. She said John Helyar had insulted her. To them, ending these lives was a way to cleanse evil. They called it spiritual cleansing or holy revenge. In April 1983, they met with San Francisco investigators for a 5-hour press conference. At first, they admitted their actions. Susan sat smiling beside Michael as he described their mission. Later, they withdrew those statements and pleaded not guilty at trial. On June 12, 1984, Susan was found guilty of ending Karen Barnes's life. She received 25 years to life in prison. She later faced trials for the other 2 fatal acts. For taking Clark Stevens' life, she got 50 years to life. For taking John Helyar's life, she got 75 years to life. In 1989, California's First District Court of Appeal confirmed all sentences. Both Susan and Michael remain in prison. Susan is held at the Central California Women's Facility, serving 75 years to life with little chance of release soon. Although Susan could apply for release because of her age and time served, she has never shown interest in changing her beliefs. In a 2015 parole hearing, officials denied her release and set her next review for 2030. By then, she will be 88 years old. At the core of their actions was the idea that their victims posed a spiritual danger. They claimed to be mystics who could spot and remove evil spirits or witches. To them, ending these lives was part of a religious rite meant to protect others from spiritual harm. It appears their beliefs hardened after they moved to remote areas. There, they used substances, studied mysticism, and cut ties with regular society. Michael's daughter from his first marriage, Jennifer, Jen, Carson, lived with Susan before the fatal incidents. She remembers terrifying times. Susan often withheld food from her. She called Jen the devil. She harmed her physically. At times, she held Jen underwater until Jen could barely breathe. Jen's mother rescued her from that home. Jen now works to help others heal from trauma. She opposes any release of Susan and Michael. She says they are still dangerous. People suspect Susan and Michael may have been behind other fatal incidents in Europe and the US. However, they were only convicted for the 3 in California. The next couple had only been married for 3 weeks. By the end of Thanksgiving weekend, parts of his body were in her trash. Omea RF Nelson was born in Cairo, Egypt in 1968. She was one of 16 children. She and 2 sisters grew up with their mother in a poor neighborhood near a city cemetery. When she was 6, she went through a customary procedure that she later said caused lasting harm. In 1986, she moved to the United States by marrying an American citizen, Roger Stainbrook. They later divorced. After that, she lived in Southern California. She found work as a nanny and did some modeling in Costa Mesa. She also went by several different names. That let her form quick friendships with older men. Reports say she was involved in theft, a weapon-related incident, and tying people up. In one case, she pointed a gun at an ex. In another, a guard was hurt during shoplifting. In October 1991, when she was about 23, she met William Edwin Bill Nelson. He was 56. He had once been a pilot and later became a computer programmer. He had also been caught smuggling pot. They reportedly said vows within days, though there's no clear record. Their time together lasted under 3 weeks. She later said Bill harmed her physically and forced unwanted acts. She claimed he applied pressure to her neck during a private moment, threw her cat out of a moving car, and forced himself on her. On November 28th, she says she managed to break free. She hit him with a lamp. She poked him with scissors. She struck him with an iron. He passed. Over about 12 hours afterward, she cut his body into parts. She removed his skin. She symbolically cut off his genitals. She boiled his hands to erase fingerprints. She cooked his head. She mixed some parts with leftover turkey from Thanksgiving. She sent many pieces through the sink's garbage disposal. Neighbors heard it running all night. The rest she wrapped in newspaper. Later, she told a doctor she had barbecued and tasted his ribs. She later denied eating any of his flesh. In the days that followed, Omea drove Bill's Corvette around Orange County. She asked former friends to help hide what was left. She offered them a large sum of money. One person agreed to listen, but then told the police. On December 1st, officers found many body parts in trash bags at her apartment and in the car. They also saw cooking pots, a cooler with the head, and other utensils. When she was taken in on December 2nd, her story changed. At first, she denied any part in it. Then she blamed strangers. Finally, she admitted only she could not cut up a body by herself. She was charged with taking Bill's life. Her trial began a year later in Santa Ana. Her lawyers said she acted to protect herself. They pointed to her childhood harm and what she described as his mistreatment. They asked the jury to see her as someone who had snapped under pressure. Prosecutors said she was the one who chose older men, wed them quickly, and then took their lives for money. Bill's former wife testified he had never hurt anyone. Doctors found no signs he had harmed Omea in a way they could measure. Evidence showed Bill had been tied up before he passed. A doctor diagnosed her as unstable. He described the red lipstick, high heels, and hat she wore while she cut him up. He repeated her claim that she tasted his ribs, but noted she later said that was untrue. After 6 days, the jury decided it was not a planned act but more than a sudden reaction. They found her responsible for second-degree charges. They also added extra time for earlier weapon incidents involving an ex. On March the 12th, 1993, the judge gave her 27 years to life. That included 25 years for the main act and added years for the other charges, though her lawyers hoped she could ask for release around 2007. Extra penalties pushed that date back. She has been held in women's prisons in Central and Southern California. She first asked for release in 2006 and again in 2011. Each time, officials said she did not fully accept what she did. They also noted she broke prison rules and seemed unpredictable. She may become eligible again around 2026. In 2011, she spoke at her hearing and said, "I will do my very best to be the good person God made me to be, and I'm not danger to anybody." But prosecutors argued she did not show true regret. Up next are 13 kids, a locked house, and one brave escape that exposed it all. Louise Turpin was born Louise Ann Robinette in 1968. She met David Allen Turpin at Princeton High School in West Virginia. He was born October 17, 1961, and later worked as an aerospace engineer. They married in 1985, when Louise was just 16. They were active in a Pentecostal church. They believed they were meant to have many children. Between 1988 and 2015, they welcomed 13. They lived in Texas until about 2010. Then they moved to Paris, California. Neighbors noticed the children were often quiet, pale, and thin. Sometimes they skipped instead of walking. No one knew what was happening inside their home. Over many years, Louise and David harmed their children on purpose. The children ate only one meal a day. They were washed as little as once a year. Some were tied to their beds for weeks or months. Some were hit. or had their breathing cut off by hand, or were tormented with words. One daughter later said, "A 12-year-old child had arms as thin as a baby's." The oldest child, then 29, weighed only 82 pounds. Many of them could not think clearly and did not know basic life skills. On January 14, 2018, Jordan Turpin made a brave escape. At about 6 a.m., she climbed out a window. She found a disconnected cell phone. She dialed 911. She said her parents were harming the children. She said her 2 little sisters were still tied to their beds. She said the house was so filthy that she sometimes could not breathe. Police arrived that evening. They found the children of all ages locked in rooms. The children were undernourished, filthy, and bound. Some officers thought they were all minors. Later they learned that most were adults whose bodies had been reduced by starvation. Investigators uncovered hundreds of journals. The children had written about their daily suffering. The parents had signed papers saying the children were in private homeschooling programs. Prosecutors later called those statements lies. In court, the parents tried to say Louise had a serious mental condition. The judge refused. He said the public was still at great risk. Experts and family members pointed to a cycle of harm passed down through generations. Louise herself had been mistreated as a child. David made most of the final decisions. Louise carried out many of the punishments. Together, they kept tight control over all 13 children. Some writers compared their home to a cult, with David as the leader. In February 2019, both Louise and David admitted guilt in court. They faced 14 serious legal charges. These included 1 count of severe harm, 4 counts of forced confinement, 6 counts of harsh treatment of an adult dependent, and 3 counts of willful harm to a child. David also faced 1 count of improper contact with a minor. Bail was set at $9 million for Louise and $12 million for David. Their sentencing hearing took place in April 2019 in Riverside Superior Court. The Turpin children spoke about their experiences. One daughter said, "Now I'm taking my life back. I'm a fighter. Life is great. I fought to become who I am." A son said he still had bad dreams but forgave his parents. He was studying software engineering. Louise spoke through her lawyer. She said, "I am sorry for everything I have done to hurt my children. I love them so much. I look forward to the day I can see them, hug them, and say I'm sorry." After sentencing, Louise was sent to the Central California Women's Facility. David was sent to Corcoran State Prison. Both received life terms with the chance of review after 25 years. They may become eligible around 2044, though experts doubt they will be released because of how severe their actions were. Louise Turpin is now 57 and serving her sentence in California. Their case remains one of the most shocking child neglect and harm cases in U.S. history. Their 13 children, once isolated and starved, are rebuilding their lives. Some have gone to college. Some live on their own now. A few have filed claims over later mistreatment in foster care. They say they feel stronger, even though they still carry deep scars. Their journey from suffering toward independence continues. The next case started with a breakup and ended in a headline no one could forget. Catherine Q was born in 1963 in South Vietnam. She later moved to the United States and settled in Garden Grove, California. In December 2009, she married a man known in court records only as Glenn. They separated by mid-2011. There is no public record of any children from that marriage. Q's early years included painful events. Her public defender said she survived unwanted touching and other mistreatment in war-torn Vietnam. Those experiences left deep psychological scars. By May 2011, her marriage had fallen apart. Glenn filed for divorce that month. He also began seeing an ex-girlfriend. Prosecutors said that relationship fueled Q's anger. On the night of July 11, 2011, Q served dinner laced with a sleep aid, probably a prescription sedative. Glenn fell asleep and went to bed. While he was unconscious, she tied his arms and legs to the bedposts. When he woke up, she pulled down his pants. She then used a kitchen tool to mutilate him. Q carried the severed organ into the kitchen. She placed it into the garbage disposal and turned it on. The device shredded the tissue further. At some point during this, she called 911. On the call, she repeated, "You deserve it," 3 times. A hidden recorder in the bedroom captured her words. Glenn survived the incident, but medical teams could not restore his original anatomy. He later said that although he could urinate, he would never be the same. He described a loss of hope and a sense that his identity had been taken from him. At trial, the prosecution argued that Q planned the act out of jealousy and spite. They said she wanted revenge for her husband's new relationship and the divorce filing. The defense said Q suffered from mental health issues and possible post-traumatic stress. They claimed she lost touch with reality and could not understand what she was doing. Her case went before a jury in April 2013. She entered a plea of not guilty. The jury heard the recording of her 911 call and the hidden audio. On April 29, 2013, they found her responsible for severe harm and serious bodily injury. On June 28, 2013, the judge sentenced her to life behind bars with the chance for release after 7 years. The request for probation was denied, likely because of the lasting impact on her husband. As of August 2021, Q remained at the Central California Women's Facility. Her next hearing for possible parole is set for September 2025. Up next is A Secret Lover, A $1 Million Policy, and One Spare Key. Nanette Ann Packard is in prison for life without any chance of early release. Sometimes she used the names Nanette Johnston or Nanette Packard McNeil. She was found guilty of arranging the fatal shooting of her wealthy partner, William Bill McLaughlin. The story began in the early 1990s. Nanette saw Bill's personal ad in a local magazine. She was in her late 20s then. She had 2 young children and wanted a stable home. Bill was 55 and had made his fortune in medical technology. Nanette moved into his Newport Beach house. She said she would help manage money and start a business with him. Over time, Nanette took out a life insurance policy on Bill for $1 million. She also stood to gain cash and free housing from his will. While living together, she met Eric Naposki at a gym. He used to play professional football. Nanette called him a friend, but later said he was a business contact. She kept their relationship secret from Bill. In December 1994, Bill came home from a trip. He was wearing a robe and relaxing in the kitchen. A man he had let inside the house shot him 6 times in the chest. Bill's adult son, who needed help to move around, heard the shots upstairs. He found his father injured on the floor and called for help right away. Bill did not survive. Investigators later learned that Nanette had given Naposki a spare key and told him Bill's schedule. She faced 2 reasons to plan this. First, she worried Bill would discover she was taking his money. Second, she wanted the insurance payout, the money from his will and free use of the beachfront home. Before the shooting, Nanette had written large checks from Bill's bank account. The day before the incident, she moved $250,000 into her own account. In total, she took at least $500,000 from his accounts and estate. In 1996, Nanette was charged with forging checks. She admitted guilt and spent about a year behind bars. The 1994 case stayed closed for nearly 15 years. Then detectives used new ballistics tests to narrow down possible guns. They also got witnesses to speak who had stayed silent before. Prosecutors said Nanette acted out of greed and fear. They said she did not want Bill to learn about her spending or her secret relationship. They described her as someone who would harm another person for money. In July 2011, Eric Naposki went on trial. An Orange County jury decided he was guilty of first-degree slaying for financial gain. He was given a life sentence without parole in August 2012. Nanette's trial came next. In January 2012, a jury of 9 women and 3 men took 4 hours to agree she had planned Bill's end for money. On May 18, 2012, the judge sentenced her to life in prison with no chance of release. At her sentencing hearing, one of Bill's daughters spoke. She said, "The long trail of lies has finally caught up to you." In a 2021 interview, Nanette said she still felt sorry for what happened. She insisted she did not pull the trigger. She said that if she had not been in a secret relationship, Bill might still be alive. She also said she could not be sure who fired the shots. Today, Nanette is about 56 years old. She spends her days in a California prison. She can no longer see the children she once said Bill helped support. Her story shows how trust and affection were twisted into a plan that went unnoticed for years.